Hey everyone, we're back, we're live, and I do these quick one-pager working sessions because although I give you guys a lot of practical advice and I give you the resources, sometimes you need somebody to flesh it out. Like you're too intimately involved with your cause to understand like, okay, what means most to a funder and how do I articulate that quickly and at least get them to ask some more questions. So that's why I do these sessions for y'all. If you want to get the access to the free one-pager that we're using today, you can go grab that at forpurposelive.com/page. And I'm going to roll a quick intro, and then I will introduce you to Claudia, who we're going to work with today with her foundation, Will Strong. Hey, Claudia.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. Well, I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit over the past few weeks as you've gotten some of our resources and gotten into some of our programs. And I know that you're in the research space, and we were just talking about how research can be tough. So I'm excited to develop out this one-pager for you so that you can start having those conversations about research in a way that isn't so overwhelming and isn't just like, give millions of dollars and in an impactful way where funders can feel like, okay, I can make an impact here. So before we dive into it, do you want to just give a quick introduction and tell us about Will Strong?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thanks so much, Rebecca. So I'm Claudia Miniatis, and I am the founder and director of the Will Strong Cancer Foundation. And Will Strong was created from a very, hard and challenging situation that we went through with my youngest son, Will. He was diagnosed with cancer with acute myeloid leukemia when he was 14. And, before his diagnosis, we knew very little about cancer and certainly didn't know anything about childhood cancer. And, once he had his diagnosis and we went through treatment, we learned a lot about the lack of funding, the lack of targeted and effective treatments for specifically childhood cancer diagnosed in young adults as well. And unfortunately, because of that lack of funding and lack of treatment options, Will really didn't have any good options. And he died when he was 15, despite having excellent care at one of the top children's hospitals in the country. And so it was really important for Will to make a difference in the world. He was a pretty strong-willed kid, and he certainly had a lot of opinions and wanted to do something with his life. And I assured him that he already had, just by allowing me to share his story. And I basically said, "Hey, listen, what can I do to kind of take the torch from you and make a difference in your name?" Pretty remarkable for a 15-year-old teenage boy who was facing really the end of his life, to have the mindset to want to make a difference. But that was Will. He was many things, but he was also a very caring and compassionate person, as well as very stubborn and many other things. But anyway, so that was a little over 3 years ago. And since then, Will Strong has worked to, be a powerful voice in the fight against childhood cancer, as well as cancer diagnosed in young adults. And we fund research primarily, because to me, that was one of the big ways that we could step in and make a difference, because we did experience that lack of research and treatments for our own son, and didn't want any other parent to have to suffer the same. So thus Will Strong, and thus the focus on research and support.
Wow. So that's amazing. I do love that you're, building and leaving and continuing to grow Will's legacy. How have you gotten, like, in your first years of your organization, like, how did you choose to get funds for research? Because that's always like, what's the business model? How do we get those funds? How did you lay the groundwork there?
Yeah, so, I don't come from a nonprofit background. I don't come from necessarily a marketing background whatsoever. And so really the plan and the framework was really sharing his story. And when Will died, the world shut down a couple weeks later due to COVID. But we were fortunate in that we had a really big community around us. As I said before, Will allowed me to share his story, and I wrote quite a bit when he was going through treatment, and then when he was in hospice care and beyond. And so a lot of people had engaged in that storytelling part of Will and our family and treatment and all the themes around that. And so I think, we were fortunate to have the attention of a fairly large community who wanted to make a difference and wanted to help. So, when we first started, that was really the plan, was just to see what I could do, and in terms of building some volume, and also surround myself with experts in research, because I don't come from that background, and find a way to be impactful, at least, to start. And, what we found quickly was that people were willing to step up, and that donations add up quickly. And even if they're, $100 here, $100 there, and of course we had people step up at a bigger level as well. And then we were able to again engage with researchers. We're here in Denver, Colorado, so primarily my focus for now is supporting the research at the Anschutz campus, which is here in Aurora. But we were able to engage with experts who quickly articulated their needs, and a foundation like Will Strong can be very nimble with filling funding gaps that help researchers push the needle forward and remove bottlenecks. So, for instance, it could be a piece of equipment that they couldn't otherwise get funded, that allows them to fast track their research. Sometimes it's a personnel, it's the addition of someone. Or, for instance, one of the things that we did was fund the biobank, which is the tissue bank at Children's Colorado, in order to have it be more robust, expanded, and have researchers and clinicians have easy access to tissue samples. So things like that sometimes are hard to find funding for. And so that's where Will Strong was able to step in and make a difference. And really, so the plan is still a work in progress, because we're constantly trying to build volume. And we've just been continuously expanding our donor base. But we definitely find a need to now, 3 years in, take it to that next level in order to remain healthy, robust, and so that I don't have to stay up all night worrying about how I'm going to do the next thing.
I love this, because it really helps me understand, and I always have my hat as a funder on, but me understand, okay, why am I going to give my money to you over somebody else? And when it's for research, I certainly don't want to give money where you're a middleman. If I can just give money to the universities, or I could just give money to research directly, why do I need you? And you're saying, like, listen, there's things that are needed. We know how to find, whether it's equipment need, whether it's, catalyzing like a young researcher, we know how to have those conversations and fund things that may not fall into what a university is willing to fund, or what they can otherwise get funding for. So then it's like, oh, okay, that seems crazy to me, that like critical research isn't being done because of a piece of equipment. And if you're going to take the time, and like, of the needs, you've made the relationships, and you understand the landscape, and exactly what you would fund, and what that one piece of equipment could have, impact on how many research studies or whatever, then that to me goes like, cool. Like, you've got a plan, and you're doing way more than just throwing money at research.
That's right. Yeah, we're really, really focused on stepping in a meaningful way. And like I said, filling those funding gaps. And one of the things, and I do hear that often, well, why can't I just make the donation to Children's Hospital? why can't I just make the donation to, and again, in this case, we're primarily focused on supporting here in Colorado because I have great relationships with researchers and clinicians and department heads. But I do get asked that, and my answer is always, think of a donation, unless you are donating at a very high level, it is very unlikely that you will be able to designate your donation to any particular program. Whereas for Will Strong, I am able to direct the funding in support of specific research initiatives. And so I can sort of amplify the power of more smaller donations, and really kind of be a resource for people who believe in research and believe that this is an important mission, because we do need to fill those funding gaps. I mean, it's a big deal. Rebecca, as I was telling you earlier, 4% or really less than 4% of the National Cancer Institute funding goes in support of all children's cancers. And children's cancers is even a bit of I guess, a disservice, because that implies, when you hear children's cancer, you think of small children. Well, really, cancer diagnosed up through into someone's late 20s and early 30s is still considered children's cancer. So, in order to help change the narrative for all of these young cancer patients, we can and we should be, funding more, because their cancer is so different than that found in much older adults. And so, one of the reasons, people will say, why Will Strong? And I say, because we provide direct funding. We pay no indirects. So I don't pay to keep the lights on. I don't pay to buy toilet paper. I'm paying, everything that I am granting is in direct support of whatever initiative that me and my team, my board members, have determined is the best use of our support. So it's a way to amplify other people's support and pull it all together and make it really meaningful and impactful.
I love that. So even in some of what you were just saying, like it's starting to get to the problem and the solution, why this is a problem, the background, and kind of why Will Strong is a solution. If we go into your program name, is Will Strong specifically for the leukemia research, for the leukemia that Will had?
So currently, what our focus is on funding research in support of more aggressive pediatric blood malignancies. So including acute myeloid leukemia, that is one of the more aggressive and more complex diagnoses. And again, as I said earlier, if a young person, a 15-year-old, is diagnosed with AML, which is what Will had, the biology of their cancer is very unique, nothing like what they would see in an older adult. And therefore, so not only are the drivers of the cancer different, the biology of the cancer is different, but the treatment needs to be different because the targets are very different. And so, primarily we do support the more hard to treat, less researched pediatric, again, I'll call it pediatric for lack of a better word, blood cancers, including AML.
Okay. So if I was going to
treatment resistant, as well, just, when I'm talking about it, a lot of times it's not only that they're hard to treat, but the treatments aren't as durable as other cancers there are some types of pediatric leukemias and blood malignancies that have a more robust and then durable response to treatments. And that's where research, that's where one can say research does make a difference, because if you look at acute lymphoid leukemia, which is the more quote unquote common type of childhood cancer, the success rate of treatment has really increased, and that's due to research, right? So now we just want the same for all of those less researched and more aggressive blood malignancies.
Okay. So
Hopefully
if I
that
were to come up with like one title
Mhm.
for this that would get people to understand what type of childhood research. So like, what was the 3 letters you was for his specific?
His is AML, so
So
acute.
his is AML. So like
Acute.
other organizations I've worked with is like support our AFE research, our AML research. This is
Mhm.
more broad than that. So
It's
we
more
need
broad. So I
something
would
that
say
isn't
it's
very long.
I would say it's more, like I have this proposal that we funded, and I don't know, maybe we can kind of talk about this specific project that we have right now that I'm focused on funding, and it's a 3-year pledge. So, I mean, stop me if I'm rambling on, but maybe this will help sort of.
Well, I just want you to tell me a quick, like, so I like, if you had a funder for 3 seconds and you could say what,
Yeah,
it's the title at the top of the page. So for me, like pediatric cancers isn't specific enough.
right.
But
I mean, I would say that, the focus definitely is on, aggressive blood cancers
okay.
diagnosed in kids, teens, and young adults.
Okay. So aggressive pediatric, blood cancer research.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we can kind of come up with like a quick tagline for that. I think after we go through all of this, but I think using some of the fact that so when we get to the end of it, we might be able to say something about like why they aren't treatable, or make the untreatable treatable, or
Exactly.
something like that.
Like, one of the things that often I'll say is, kids are worth more than 4%, right? So that might be something that we can weave in, because that speaks to the lack of funding from the National Cancer Institute, and the great need for private foundations, or like Willstrong, a public charity, to step in and fill those funding gaps.
Yep, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I understand what you mean. It's a lot to sort of wrangle into like a quick sort of, this is what it is. So
it is, and that's like the beauty of these, and the frustrating thing.
The frustration.
So many of these things are so complex, but it is literally our job to like, okay, what does this person care about, and what is the couple things I can say that will at least ask them to help me go into that 3-page paper.
Yes. Yeah. What's going to grab their attention? What's going to catch their eye or resonate with them in terms of getting them at least perked up enough where I can talk a little bit more. So, and also at least giving a sense of what we're doing, right? I mean, I don't want to be a sensationalist.
Yeah. And that's why I say too, is like, I think the problem's great, because you're in the problem. We're raising awareness, because we were like, oh, I had no clue that it was only 4% of cancer funds that went to kids. And I had no clue that like some of these aggressive forms, you really can't use certain treatments, or they won't work, or whatever. We really need to kind of understand what's different, and how we can use something other than what we would typically prescribe. And we go, oh, okay, that's interesting. Well, that seems like intense and something I can't be a part of. And that's when we switch to like, actually,
yes, you can.
We do have a pretty straightforward solution for this. This is what's needed, and this is how you can help.
That's right.
So, because a lot of people do focus so much on the problem, that they overwhelm their audience and they go, I get that that sucks, but like, you've made me feel completely helpless with that.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, it's finding the right tone and empowering people to understand they can make a difference, for sure.
100%. So let's start with the problem. And remember, we're like specifically for aggressive pediatric blood cancers. What is the problem? So I really do love that you have 4% of all cancer research funds goes to adult cancer research. I'd like to start this section off with prevalence, or when, or basically like when they get diagnosed with this, how quickly, how bad the diagnosis or prognosis is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can go into like a little bit of information around that. So, every day in this country, 47 young people are diagnosed with cancer. And so, for our intents and purposes, we'll call it pediatric cancer. So within that framework, that's anyone from up to age 19 is considered pediatric cancer. Although again, the reality is that really it goes beyond that. But so every day, 47 young people are diagnosed with cancer every day. That is actually, the rate is on the rise slightly. It is the #1 killer of kids up until 19 or through 19, killer of kids by disease. So it is a huge problem. Cancer is the #1 killer of disease for kids. So
I don't like that. Okay, which is the #1. I don't like the words killer of disease.
Yeah, no, but it's like that, but that's the reality. Cause of death by, it's the #1 cause of death by disease.
#1 cause of death. I like that. I just didn't want it to sound like it's killing the disease itself.
Yeah.
Which is the number.
Other things that come to mind surrounding the problem, and then of course how addressing it via research can be helpful. So currently, young people are the diagnosis is typically acute. In fact, almost always acute. And so treatment needs to start right away because things change very quickly with acute cancers. And so the treatments that exist right now are primarily one size fits all. They're very old chemotherapies that were developed decades ago. And when a young person is treated with those very toxic and systemic treatments, it damages their bodies during a time when development is super critical. So you can imagine as a teenager, for instance, the changes that are going on in your body as you're developing, and then you're being blasted by, very toxic systemic chemotherapies that aren't even very targeted. Rather, they're just old chemotherapies that they've been using for decades. They cause a ton of problems, while also not being super effective and targeted for specific types of cancer. They also end up creating a lot of issues for survivors. So, organ damage, organ failure, fertility issues, developmental issues that are, in the brain, emotional development issues, all of those things can be a result of the existing treatments. So not only are we trying to address the actual surviving the diagnosis, but we want we want these young patients, these young cancer patients, to come through their diagnosis and be able to thrive in survivorship rather than be saddled with a host of lifetime and sometimes life-limiting other
Well, I would
secondary.
focus less on that.
Okay.
I would focus less on that because I feel like a funder would care more about like, oh my gosh, we don't have the right treatments to save
Right.
this person's life
Right.
because we haven't done the research. I mean,
Right.
I really don't feel like I'm going to be able to like help heal the trauma of the fact that you got cancer and like, you know what I mean? All of that, all the secondary.
So actually it's not just the trauma. It's for instance, some of these treatments are, you know, they cause cardiotoxicity. And so again, by addressing the research for treatments, you're also being more targeted with the treatment and perhaps limiting some of the toxic effects on the body.
So it's like an
Right.
additional benefit of research.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll add it into the solution area of like,
Yeah.
with this more research, we get all these other added benefits.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good idea.
But the problem is that I really want to go into the 4%. So these acute diagnoses are often hard to treat. We haven't talked about blood yet, like why blood versus other cancer.
Well, so childhood leukemia is the most common type of cancer, of childhood cancer. Leukemia.
So can we just up top, can we say aggressive pediatric cancer research, or do we need to say blood? Because as a funder, I would go, what's the blood? What has to do with the blood?
Well, blood cancer. So that's all blood. That's leukemias and other kinds of blood cancers. And saying aggressive pediatric, I think that's
acute.
Well, I think what it is,
or just pediatric.
I mean, maybe pediatric cancer research.
Okay, and so with this, is this too broad?
I don't think so, because I think that it conveys the I don't think so, because I think it conveys the fact that it's I almost like the word childhood cancer research better, because pediatric just seems like it's for babies.
Yeah.
And then people sort of don't understand. It's harder to then kind of bring them along the story of like, no, this is happening to 19-year-olds. And so maybe pediatric cancer research is fine, because, or childhood cancer research is fine on that one. Because some of the things that we do actually can be used by other types of cancer researchers, like not just blood cancer. It could be brain cancer, bone cancer, etc.
So typically, like niching down or exclusivity is actually better, because it's like, even if there's additional benefits of like I have a program for foster and adopted kids, and could you use the activities for other people with other trauma? Yes, but like the fact that I keep it to foster and adopted kids helps me tell my story more. And if I start like allowing it to help kids with autism and divorced parents and all these other things, people don't quite get what I do.
They don't. Okay. So, yeah. Then I would say, like, you know, childhood cancer research. I mean, you know, I don't know how to wordsmith it, but with a focus on aggressive blood cancer.
Okay.
You know.
Okay. So
it's hard to come up with like a snappy, you know, way to say it. I mean, it's blood cancer and it's childhood cancer, but we focus on blood cancer. Okay. And the more aggressive and less researched blood cancers.
So what can we say? Childhood blood cancer research?
Yeah.
So here's my deal, is if we say blood cancer research, then we need to address blood in the problem. So we need to say 82% of all of the cancers are blood cancers, or like there's some reason why we're blood and not everything else. If we just say childhood cancer research, then what we need to address in the problem is all of the other big foundations that are specific to childhood cancer research and why that's not good enough.
Right.
So you can go either way, but one's going to be like, tell me why blood, and the other one's going to tell me why you.
Mm-hmm.
Which
well,
is
I mean, I think because the program that I most currently am supporting and also needing to raise money for is in support of blood cancer research specifically. So I think that will come up.
Okay. So again, as the founder of Willstrong, why is it blood cancers that you are, why do we need to care? Why does the rest of the world, like, what is unique about blood cancers versus other cancers?
Well, blood cancer is the most common type of pediatric cancer, as well as, and this might just be too much information, but it is, any advances in the lab are immediately applied to a greater population beyond kids. That's not the case with all cancers.
So can we say majority of diagnoses are of the blood, acute, and treatment is needed immediately?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, where are you with that? With
majorities here
of the diagnoses are, I would just say, majority of childhood cancer diagnoses are acute leukemias or acute blood cancers.
And treatment is needed immediately. Okay. So that's perfect. That's enough to just like, okay, now I get why we're doing blood. It means like that's the one that we really need to focus on if we're going to make the biggest impact.
Right.
Okay. And treatment is needed immediately. These acute diagnoses, which I don't like saying that twice, these diagnoses are often hard to treat or treatment resistant. And I want to say why that is and work in like, because we haven't done enough research.
Right.
So
like due to lack of funding for research, I don't know how to say it. Let's see. These diagnoses are often hard to treat.
Okay.
The only thing that I have to be careful on is there has been a lot of research around, if we back up, like around acute lymphoid leukemia, ALL. So that is the more common type of childhood leukemia, whereas there are some that are like AML that are less common and way more aggressive. So I don't know if there's a way to be more specific, which I think is what you were getting at.
We want to be less specific. We want to be less specific. So we want to do, because you've lost somebody as soon as you go on like, well, there's actually complexities to this. You want to go like, okay, mainly this is the deal. Like if people can get that. So, but I want it to be accurate. I don't want to say the majority of these are hard to treat or treatment resistance due to lack of research if that's not accurate.
Well, here's the accurate thing. The majority of childhood cancer diagnoses are blood cancers, are acute blood cancers. And then you could just go in certain types of blood cancers are.
No, we don't want to go there.
I don't know how else to say it, because that is correct to say that the majority of cancer diagnosed in young people is leukemia, acute leukemia. But because of the distinction, some of the leukemias are more researched and have better outcomes. There is a whole subset of other leukemias that require way more research, and they're way more lethal. And that's
what are you most focused on?
And that's what I'm focused on, the more aggressive blood cancers.
Okay, so we need to make that clear.
Okay.
So we can't have overarching blood cancer research if you're really focused on these ones, because you're making the case right here for, you know what, there's actually been a lot of research and there's pretty good treatment pathways for these diagnoses. So I think it either is like aggressive or, but see, you see how this, like, just getting this down, just understanding what Will Strong really does. Because as soon as you start going, and it could help this, and it could help this, and it kind of helps this, and we could apply it to adults, like, we don't care about all the secondary. We need to know the primary.
Right. Yes. No, I mean, this is exactly this exercise is really important.
So do you, like, we can call it aggressive childhood blood cancer research, or
I think for me, it's more the semantics of the aggressive research. I feel like we're modifying research. That's what's bothering me, I think.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to
like research for.
Yeah. Research for aggressive child. Yes. Thank you. I think that's what was throwing me off, because I was like,
your research may or may not be done aggressively.
Yeah. Like, oh, these researchers are really aggressive. They're just throwing stuff around, and
So I think that this is where, and this is it, guys. Like, this is the sausage making. This is where when you get to these, you know, debates on your board of directors, or your, like, if you don't have this, and you sometimes just go like, well, it's kind of a little bit of everything. That's where we need to start.
Yep. No, you're spot on. It's absolutely true. And that's where a lot of my pain points come in, because it's already a more complicated topic to be able to distill and communicate around. And then because there are these sort of, you know, secondary, these cascade effects, it's hard not to want to go there. But you're spot on, Rebecca. It's like, you lose people very quickly. So,
well, and in the Our Impact section, like, I get to say that if you help a kid with complex trauma, that, like, they will have kids that won't go into care, and our whole society will be better, and there'll be less people in prisons and all that. But those aren't all the issues. That's not what your long-term impact.
Right.
So you get to actually say that in the impact section of this one pager. It just isn't the argument of the problem or the solution.
Yes. No, that makes sense.
So, so good. So now we're here. Still the same. Number one cause of death by disease. The majority of diagnoses are acute blood cancers, and treatment is needed immediately. So what can we say about these aggressive ones?
In what way? What do you specifically?
So I'm saying the majority of diagnoses are acute blood cancers, but we are saying we're really working on even a percentage of those, right?
Yes.
So the majority of diagnoses are acute blood cancer, and I want to say something like, and for the 42% of those who are diagnosed with an aggressive form without treatment, like, they have this type of prognosis, like, or, you know.
I mean, it's hard to, I don't have a, you know, empirical number to give you, but, you know, I would say, I mean, tell me what you think about just saying, you know, because it is true. The majority of childhood cancer diagnoses are acute blood cancers. You know, a subset of those diagnoses are particularly aggressive or more lethal. They're more lethal. That's what they are. I don't have a number for you.
No, I
don't
think
know
that
that
that's
I've ever
fine.
actually
I think
seen a
we can
number.
say,
Yeah.
and for those diagnosed with the majority of diagnoses are acute blood cancer, some of which
Are particularly lethal or something like that.
These diagnoses are often hard to treat or treatment resistant due to the lack of research dedicated to but we don't want to say that they're rare.
No.
Dedicated to these. I want to what is it? I wanted to say, like, the lack of research is dedicated to they're not unique conditions. They're not rare conditions. They're
complex diagnoses. That's what they are. So, for instance, AML, which is what Will had, I mean, that's actually more of like a set of complex diseases, right? And there's all these different genetic signatures on the various types of AML that make it more lethal, harder to treat, and way less understood. So.
Yeah. Okay. So 4% of all cancer research funds go to adult cancer research, which often cannot be applied to child patients.
So no, actually, so it's 4% of, only 4% of national cancer research funding goes to childhood cancer.
Research funding go to, right. Only 4% of national research funding go to childhood.
To all childhood cancers.
Okay, only 4% of national research funding goes to childhood cancer research. Or is it better to say 96% of national research funding goes to adult?
I think it's more powerful to say 4% goes to childhood cancer.
Okay. So then we're just not going to say that the which often cannot be applied to child patients.
I think you could just say, leaving treatment option or, going back to that statement that I made earlier, basically now these kids just rely on these one size fits all archaic treatments.
Yep. Leaving I want to say something like only 4% of national research funding goes to childhood cancer research, leaving providers limited options that are like more appropriate for, like, there are these like blanket.
Yeah.
What words did you just use?
One size fits all.
Literal, limited, one size fits all treatment options. Okay, that is like good enough.
Yeah.
For a quick problem statement. Now we get to go into the solution.
Right.
So how does Will Strong your research program so just give me the like the overarching what you do for research to fix this problem.
So we step in and fill funding gaps for researchers. We provide much needed equipment that allows them to fast track their research. We provide resource to enroll kids in clinical trials on site. We provide personnel.
Okay. When we going back to the problem, only 4%. So tell me about some of these problems. Why are there funding gaps? Why do we need equipment?
So, oftentimes researchers are, they are looking for those large federal grants, which are very challenging to secure. It's a very competitive market out there for researchers, and particularly childhood cancer researchers, to secure any funding. And so what happens is that, they are all fighting for the same dollars. And when they get grant money, oftentimes those funds are restricted. So while the grant might allow for certain parts of funding for a project, it may not allow for all of it. So as an example, we funded a researcher who was working on AML research, and she asked for a piece of equipment that is a really sensitive, it allows her to detect cancer at a really, really sensitive level. And it also allows her to move her work faster because it's just a really high-tech piece of equipment. And in order to get that, she needed Will Strong to come in and provide her funding so that she could add that to her lab. And so it removes a bottleneck in her work. So oftentimes.
Okay, so yeah, so let's just say most research is funded through large federal grants. Is that true? Let's just say often.
Yeah.
Research is funded through large federal grants, which have restricted funds and can leave researchers without the necessary supplies, equipment, and research team needed to test their theories, to test their to conduct needed. We'll just say that. And then furthermore, with such limited funding, many innovative projects never, I want to say never get off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the answer could just be sitting on someone's hard drive. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Furthermore, with such limited funding, many innovative projects never get off the ground due to the competitive nature of funding. Okay, so I think that helps with Will Strong's research program fills funding gaps, which you just explained, provides much needed equipment, resources to enroll children in clinical trial. Well, okay. Will Strong's research program fills funding gaps, provides much needed equipment, fills funding gaps to provide personnel, much needed equipment, resources to enroll children in clinical trials. And would you or do you do pilot programs? Like, would you give like a $10,000 grant so that somebody could test a pilot? Or...
Yeah. So, a seed grant is basically what that's called.
Yeah.
So grants for young investigators, oftentimes they need a seed grant to develop a body of work so that they can then use that to unlock larger federal grants. So oftentimes they do rely on foundations like us to provide funding for those types of things. And one of the things that, and I may be getting ahead of myself, but just since we're kind of on the topic, one of the things that can get these researchers very bottlenecked is the lack of personnel. So, for instance, our latest pledge was in support of a lab there at Anschutz campus, and their team is working on aggressive pediatric blood cancer, and we just pledged $300,000 over the next 3 years so that they could hire a data scientist. Because what happens too is that, again, they have research, it sits, they can't distill it down into bite-sized chunks. So they now have hired someone, because of this grant that we've given them, to take all of the research data and make sense of it all for them so that they can fast track their discovery, fast track their work. So.
Okay, yeah, no, I think that's perfect. And I think that probably is going to be under the why us, like the fact that you have the time or the knowledge or the relationships or understand the complexities of like what is needed by who, where does this money go to? You also understand the limitations of the research, that like it's not just seed money, or it's not just getting a project funded, it's also disseminating that, and like it's all the things.
It's all there's a lot behind this, underneath the hood. There's a lot of bottlenecks that we can come in and help alleviate.
Okay, so I write what your research program does. Will Strong is able to provide direct funding to research without overhead or indirect costs. Without overhead or indirect costs. I want to say like, universities and unlike universities, Will Strong is able to provide direct funding to research without overhead or indirect costs. Now tell me like why it's the solution. So by understanding the limitations of current research and opportunities of I don't want to say projects, but I don't want to keep saying research. By understanding the limitations of current projects. This is what I do all day long.
I know. It's, well, and again, I mean, we're talking about such a niche thing. There's only so many ways to describe research.
By understanding the limitations of current projects and opportunities of new innovation research may have for the field, for future patients. We don't care about the field. Or we should care less about the field than the patients. By understanding the limitations of current projects and opportunities new innovative research may have for future patients, Will Strong is uniquely positioned to allocate funding where it's needed most.
Mm-hmm. We do it. Another thing that I think is important, and again, I mean, I may be getting ahead of myself, but we deploy our funding very quickly. And so we activate those grants quickly, and we make a difference. I mean, right away. We're not focused on sort of getting too wrapped up in the PR of it or any of that. Like, we just have direct relationships with researchers who are working today in the lab on projects today.
Let's just say Will Strong is able to activate funding quickly without overhead or indirect costs.
That's right.
Okay.
And, we have a very low overhead as a foundation as well. So very low. So, you're
not just taking the standard 20% and then the 15% indirect costs, and that, like, because anytime you're doing university, they're going to take just
some universities, and I don't know that we need to focus on universities, but just some universities, their indirects are up into the 70s.
Let's say, unlike larger institutions.
Yeah. And then, also just as a foundation, we have very low operational costs. I mean, it's just me sitting at my kitchen counter.
Yeah. So I think we should do operational costs in the YS.
Mm-hmm.
So let me look at what I have to do here. So problem, solution, funding needed, YS. Okay. So if you were to say a funding needed, because right now we're really writing this as why you should give Will Strong money.
Mm-hmm.
You're not saying a very specific funding need, we need $100,000.
Well, we do. We need, So basically, here's what our current funding obligation is. So we have pledged a $300,000 3-year pledge in support of the Will Strong Scholar Award for a computational biologist or a data scientist, however you want to put it, who will work specifically with pediatric blood cancer researchers to help them fast track their research, unlock larger grants, etc. So this is end of year 1, and I will be writing them $100,000 check. Beyond that, I need to raise another $200,000.
Okay.
That's what keeps me up at night.
Whatever you just said is what I need to write. Like that you have a, like that you seeking funding for this researcher that does da 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 da.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, we are seeking funding in support of the Will Strong Scholar Award, which is dedicated to a data. Well, let me think about how I would say that. The Will Strong Scholar Award allows, let me just cheat a second because I actually have the grant here, or the proposal.
Yeah, and you know what? I would not talk as much about the Will Strong. I would rather just say Will Strong is seeking funding in support of a research specialist who can do da 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 da. It doesn't really matter what you name it.
Yeah. Okay.
So Will Strong is seeking funding in support of, what's this position?
So this person is a data scientist who will work specifically in support of researchers working on childhood cancer, acute blood cancers.
Why does this help move your mission forward? Like, why have you guys prioritized all your funding or most of your funding towards this person?
Because the value add of a data scientist to a research team is massive, in that it helps them fast track their research and unlock larger federal grants. So we're sort of removing one of the bottlenecks for them, right?
Okay, so back to the problem is, we have found that the most lacking resource, like there has to be a reason why you're choosing to put this, however, $300,000 into a person versus equipment versus this versus that. Right. Or if you're not, doing that, you're like, well, we put $300,000 into equipment and we put it's just for this specific ask, the problem needs to be associated. So it doesn't have to say the most lacking resource. It can be, we have found that one of the most immediate needs of researchers.
Right. So one of the, so there's an inability to analyze sequencing data, and it limits scientific discovery, right? So a data scientist can come in and solve that problem.
So even when research has been funded and completed, there often remains, say the thing you just said about discovery.
Limits there. So seek the ability. Inability to efficiently analyze sequencing data continues to limit our scientific discoveries.
Often remains an inability to what the data?
Analyze data. Is that what I said?
The data.
Which continues to limit scientific discovery.
Okay, so this is important because you're like, oh my gosh, and even when we get all this research done, we're not maximizing it. We're not fully utilizing it.
Right.
It's just done and we do what we can, and then
it just oftentimes will sit and it's not used effectively or efficiently.
So I like that this Wilson Research Program feels funding, by understanding of current projects may have for future patients. Okay, I'm going to take some of that and put it in the YS spot. And the solution is going to be.
I'm just looking for my power cord because I think my computer is going to die.
And completed, there often remains an inability to analyze the data, which limits scientific discovery. Unlike larger institutions, activate funding quickly without overhead or indirect costs by providing a with data analysts, we can maximize findings from research. By providing research teams with data analysts, we can maximize findings from current research, ensuring precious research dollars aren't wasted and treatment solutions are realized. Oh man, sounds so good.
Sorry, I'm at a loss. My computer cord is gone.
Well, that's okay.
That's okay.
We can, if yours dies or whatever, we can wrap up here.
Yeah.
But okay, so basically by providing research, we're saying as part of the solution, by providing research teams with data analysts, we can maximize findings from current research, ensuring precious research dollars aren't wasted and treatment solutions are realized.
Oh, I love that. That sounds great.
Okay, so that's your solution, and that's where you can, I've already got some in the YS, which is going to be talking about how you guys understand the current limitations, all of that. Yeah. The funding needed is now talking about a data scientist, which makes sense because you talked about it in the problem, you talked about it in the solution.
Yep.
So, you can say is seeking 100,000 per year. You can say 200,000. You can list it however you want. Mm-hmm. Or you can just say is seeking funding and support, this salary will be whatever it is per year. Mm-hmm. And so the last portion of this is going to be your impact metrics.
Yeah.
And you actually have, this is where I would go to your job description that you have for this person. Mm-hmm. And you would say what what you expect them to accomplish within the first year. So they have analyzed however many data, they have been able to pull out significant findings or a certain amount of findings. Mm-hmm. They have helped lead strategy in where they think their work would be. Maybe they go through a couple of things and they're like, you know what? This data sorting isn't great, or this is where we should lean into. So I think your metrics are more going to be with how many and how much that person does.
Yeah.
And then I think you'll have to make the leap from how that helps the field overall.
Right. And they've actually just hired the person, which is super exciting. We made the pledge earlier this year, and I'll write the first check in support of it by the end of this year. But they've just hired, sorry, there's like fighter jets flying over my.
It's okay. I live near a base. I get it.
Anyway, so they've just hired the person in this role, and so it'll be exciting because I think pretty soon we'll have some information to provide that's a little more specific, right? So whereas I can't say, we delivered 1,000 meals or whatever.
Right.
I can get a little more granular about how this person is going to truly impact the day-to-day. What is a day in the life of? What are some of the systems they're helping put into place? Whatever the impact is, especially initially, will have to be a little bit more, I think, anecdotal than anything, but that's part of the research game. Is it takes time to have true results.
Yeah. And I think that that's fine if you focus on, some tactics and some smaller tasks that they're doing. Just every time this impact metrics more for you it might not even be metrics. You might want to write just measurement and reporting or reporting. And this is like letting the funding know what you're going to report on. But just remember, when you're doing that report or you're writing that little blurb about what you're going to report on, put on your glasses of like, who cares? Why does this matter? Because I couldn't care less if she sifts through 5,000 databases or one, if one is more meaningful for the outcome. So it's just, why does it matter?
Right.
What's the bang for the buck here?
Right. Bang for the buck.
And just, I always commit to as little reporting as possible. Like, you want to make sure that you are collecting data and measuring and reporting, but you don't want to say, we're going to promise all of this stuff and then end up under delivering and being late to your funders.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Well, I think if you can go in and fill in your reporting, then I think we made a lot of really good progress.
Yeah, I think so too. No, and I think a lot of the, kind of keeping the conversation on track with not going down the rabbit hole of all those other areas of influence or impact or need, super important, because again, in our line of business, it's real easy to just start to, over explain, go down the wrong path, you lose people's interest or whatever. And it's like, the point is to get in front of people, to have people perk up a little bit and get interested and maybe ask a few more questions, but the very least, like, let's get the conversation started and have something to give to people. So this is perfect.
Yeah. And it's like, it's what you can expect. So even with the kids that I know how to do complex trauma interventions, and I tell mentors how to work with kids in foster care, but I have to really check myself a lot and say, all you're doing is showing up for kids. I don't tell them about all this stuff I know, because they're going to go, I can't do that. And they're right. They can't do that. So like, I have to just be like, super oversimplified. You're showing up, you're being empathetic and kind and playful. And there's so much more to it, but that's what they can get. And so even if they start to lead me down some of those complex trauma conversations, I try to remind them, remember, like, you're just showing up. So for you, it would be like, we really just need this data analyst.
Yeah.
There is all that other stuff, but without this thing that I can really use your help for, we're not ready for those conversations. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. It's like one step at a time, just, building blocks so that we can get to where we need to be. And so no, this was really helpful. Just keeping a very narrow focus on what we're trying to do here and why I'm talking to people. Why am I why is Will Strong the foundation to support and get behind? And here's why, and here's what we're doing right now. And this is why we need the money today.
And don't feel good. Have board meetings that feel chewy and like question things. And one person says something, another person goes, is that what we do? Is it exactly, do we want to be inclusive? Do we want to be exclusive? There's really no right answer, but you need to know what it is.
Yes, exactly. I agree.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm glad this was helpful for you.
Yeah, no, super helpful. Yeah.
I'm excited for you. I'm excited for your program, and I'm excited for that data analyst.
Me too. I'm very excited and very grateful for the help today. So I appreciate it.
All righty. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to grab that free one pager that we just went through today. That is at forpurposelive.com/page. It's a Google Doc, and it has a bunch of questions in there for you. So you can look at those questions to help kind of weed this out. I know that it's like tough to weed all of this out, but even when if you feel like you're getting defensive or you feel like I do this all the time, it's good. It means it's good because you do know what you are trying to get funding for. You know the complexities of the problem. You know what's going to work for your mission. So I want you to grab onto that. It's the same way that we feel defensive about our kids or, mama bear about something. We want to no, this is what it is. So with your board, if there's any confusion, I say start with your board because a lot of times your board doesn't even know. And you'll get pushed by your board often to be more inclusive or well, let's not turn down funding from other childhood cancer, people that are interested in that. And I would tell you, never be driven by who's going to fund you. Don't be driven oh, we want to open ourselves up to all childhood cancer research. So that's the reason why we're going to keep our mission open. You don't want to do that. You want the riches are in the niches, even with nonprofits. So you want to be super niche just so that you know who you are serving and how you are serving them best. As soon as you start opening up and kind of diluting your population, now you may or may not be serving everyone best because you don't have a targeted approach. Now you have kind of an umbrella approach, which is harder for people to grasp. All right. I hope that helps some of you. Have a great rest of your week, day, wherever you are. And thank you so much for your service to this world. Until next time.